I'm Gail, 32 years old, and I never thought my own parents would publicly shame me on social media for being ungrateful. After years of fighting for my dreams, despite their disapproval, I built a successful graphic design career. Then came that family gathering where everything exploded, followed by their Facebook post that twisted the truth. What happened next changed our relationship forever. If you're watching this story about standing up to toxic family members, let me know where you're tuning in from and hit subscribe to join our community of boundary setters. Growing up in Oak Ridge, a middle-class suburb outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I learned early that image meant everything to my parents. Harold and Martha Wilson weren't wealthy, but they desperately wanted to appear that way. Our modest two-story home was always immaculate when guests visited, though behind closed doors, the atmosphere was tense and controlling. "A proper lady pursues respectable careers," my mother would say whenever she caught me sketching. I'd been drawing since I could hold a crayon, creating worlds on paper that gave me the freedom I lacked in reality. My bedroom walls were covered with my artwork at least until company came over. Then my mother would take everything down, replacing my creations with generic landscapes from the home goods store. "What will the Johnsons think if they see all this childish nonsense?" she'd ask, carefully storing my artwork in bins that were promptly hidden in the attic. I was 13 when she said this, hardly a child anymore, but that distinction never mattered. My father, Harold, wasn't much better. A mid-level accountant who dressed like a CEO, he viewed art as a waste of time. "Nobody makes money doodling," he'd say dismissively over dinner. "Law, medicine, business, these are careers that provide security." The irony that his own accounting job barely covered our mortgage seemed lost on him. By high school, I developed a system. I maintained decent grades in the subjects my parents valued, while secretly taking every art class offered. My art teacher, Mrs. Sandoval, became my champion, often keeping the classroom open after hours, so I could work on my portfolio for college applications. "You have real talent, Gail," she told me during my senior year. "You should apply to art schools." When I explained my parents' opposition, she helped me research scholarships and financial aid options. For the first time, I began to believe I could forge my own path. The college brochures I brought home sparked our first major confrontation. My parents had assumed I'd apply to the state university for business following their predetermined plan. When they found the California Institute of Arts materials under my mattress, my father turned purple with anger. "We will not waste money on some hippie art commune," he thundered, "and we certainly won't let you move across the country to become some starving artist cliché." My mother's approach was more subtle, but equally manipulative. "Sweetheart, we just want what's best for you," she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "Art is a wonderful hobby, but not a career. Why disappoint yourself?" Their reaction solidified my determination. With Mrs. Sandoval's guidance, I applied for scholarships and student loans. I worked weekends at the local coffee shop and evenings at the grocery store, saving every dollar. When my acceptance letter arrived, I knew there was no turning back. The night I told them my decision was the first time I'd ever stood up to my parents. We were sitting at the dinner table, the same place where my dreams had been dismissed countless times before. "I've been accepted to the California Institute of Arts," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I start this fall. I've arranged for financial aid and have savings for the rest." The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his fork with deliberate calm. "If you choose this path, you choose it alone," he said flatly. "Don't expect our support, financial or otherwise." My mother began to cry, her go-to tactic when direct control failed. "After everything we've done for you," she whispered, "this is how you repay us." That night, I packed what I could fit into my secondhand car and moved in with my best friend's family until college started. The Thompsons gave me their spare room, treating me with the supportive respect I'd never experienced at home. The next 4 years were challenging, but transformative. I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a full course load. During holidays, I stayed with friends rather than face the cold reception waiting at my childhood home. My parents occasionally called our conversations laced with subtle digs about my experimental phase and questions about when I'd come to my senses. Despite their predictions of failure, I thrived. My portfolio grew stronger, and by senior year, I'd secured an internship at Visual Forge, a respected marketing firm in Chicago. The internship turned into a job offer. And 6 years later, I'm now a senior graphic designer managing my own team. Throughout my 20s, I maintained minimal contact with my parents. Holiday cards, occasional phone calls, and rare visits, marked by tense politeness. I'd created a fulfilling life they had no part in building, yet they somehow took credit for my success when speaking to relatives or friends. We always encouraged her creativity, my mother would say at family gatherings, conveniently rewriting history. My father would nod along, adding, "Tough love works wonders." I might have continued this distant but civil relationship indefinitely, if not for meeting James 3 years ago. A software engineer with a background in family therapy, James noticed patterns in my behavior, that I'd normalized the anxiety before family calls the people-pleasing tendencies, the need for constant validation of my choices. Have you ever considered that your relationship with your parents isn't just strained, it's toxic? He asked gently after witnessing a particularly draining phone call with my mother. James helped me recognize that what I'd experienced wasn't normal parenting, but emotional manipulation and control. With his support and the help of a therapist, I began setting firmer boundaries. I limited calls to once a month. I stopped justifying my career choices. I declined invitations that felt obligatory rather than genuine. My parents noticed the change and didn't like it. The guilt trips intensified. The passive-aggressive comments about my attitude problem increased, but for the first time their tactics weren't working as effectively. I was building immunity to their manipulation, and that set the stage for the confrontation that would change everything. Rachel's wedding should have been a joyous family reunion. My cousin had always been kind to me, one of the few relatives who supported my artistic pursuits. When her invitation arrived requesting my presence as a bridesmaid, I was genuinely excited to participate. Even the knowledge that my parents would attend couldn't dampen my enthusiasm. "We'll keep interactions brief and pleasant," James assured me as we packed for the weekend trip to my hometown. He'd be attending as my plus one, his first time meeting my extended family. Remember your boundaries. You don't have to justify your life to anyone. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a restored barn with twinkling lights and wildflower arrangements that Rachel had designed herself. During the reception, I found myself surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years, many of whom followed my work on social media. "I saw that campaign you designed for that big sports brand," my Uncle Phil said, genuinely impressed. "Really fantastic stuff, Gail." Aunt Susan chimed in. "My daughter is considering art school. Would you mind if she reached out to you for advice? Your career is exactly what she aspires to." These conversations felt validating, a public acknowledgement that my chosen path had merit. I didn't notice my mother hovering nearby until I heard her sharp laugh cutting through the pleasant exchange. "Oh, Gail got lucky," Martha announced, inserting herself into the circle. "For every success story like hers, there are thousands of art graduates serving coffee." She placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing a bit too tightly. "We worried sick when she went against our advice, but some children need to learn the hard way." The mood shifted instantly. My relatives glanced uncomfortably between us, sensing the tension. I carefully removed my mother's hand and smiled politely. "I wouldn't call years of hard work luck, Mom," I replied evenly, "and I'm happy to talk with anyone considering this field about both the challenges and rewards." Martha's smile tightened. "Always so sensitive. I'm simply giving perspective to balance all this creative enthusiasm." Before I could respond, my father appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to my mother. "Is our daughter monopolizing the conversation again?" Harold asked with a chuckle that contained no actual humor. "She always did like being the center of attention." I felt James's hand on the small of my back, a gentle reminder of his presence and support. "Actually," he interjected smoothly, "everyone was just expressing admiration for Gail's professional accomplishments. It's quite impressive how she's built her career." My father's expression darkened momentarily before he recovered his social mask. "Yes, well, she comes from good stock. The Wilson determination." The conversation might have ended there if Rachel hadn't chosen that moment to announce it was time for the bouquet toss. As the single women gathered, I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment away from my parents' subtle undermining. When I returned, I found James in an intense conversation with my father near the bar. From James's rigid posture, I could tell something was wrong. As I approached, my father's voice became audible. She's always been dramatic. The theatrical exit from our home, the refusal to follow sensible guidance, pure rebellion dressed up as finding herself. He took a sip of his drink. If we hadn't pushed her, she'd have no drive at all. James spotted me, and his expression warned me this was worse than the usual backhanded comments. I stepped forward, making my presence known. Is there a problem? My mother materialized beside my father, her social smile firmly in place. No problem at all. Your father was just explaining to James how we instilled your work ethic. By withdrawing all support when I pursued my passion. The words escaped before I could filter them. Here we go again with the victim narrative. My father scoffed, his voice rising slightly. A few nearby guests glanced our way. We gave you everything and you turned your back on us because we dared suggest a practical path. Harold not here. My mother murmured, eyes darting to the onlookers. But my father was building momentum. You know what it's like raising an ungrateful child, James. Pouring your life into them only to have them reject everything you stand for. A small crowd had gathered now, including Rachel and her new husband. My cousin looked concerned, taking a step toward us. Dad, this isn't the place, I said quietly. We should... No, let's clear the air, he interrupted, his voice carrying across the reception area. Everyone thinks Gail is this self-made success story. What they don't know is how she abandoned her family, refused our guidance, and then had the audacity to act superior about her little drawing job. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Rachel's husband whispered something to the DJ, who promptly turned up the music, but the damage was done. Dozens of eyes watched our family drama unfold. My mother, ever conscious of appearances, tried damage control. Harold's just emotional because we're so proud, she explained loudly to the audience. Parents feel things deeply when their children succeed despite taking the hardest possible route. Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed responses rose to the surface. The hardest route, I repeated, keeping my voice level, was fighting for my dreams while being told they were worthless. It was working 3 jobs while studying full-time because my parents withdrew all support. It was building a career from scratch while being told I would fail. My father's face flushed with anger. After everything we sacrificed, what exactly did you sacrifice? I asked, genuinely curious. You didn't pay for my education. You didn't provide emotional support. You've spent years taking credit for success you actively tried to prevent. The silence that followed was profound. My mother's social mask slipped, revealing the cold anger beneath. My father looked as though I'd slapped him. I think we should go, James suggested quietly, his hand finding mine. Yes, I agreed. Rachel, I'm so sorry about this. I'll call you tomorrow. My cousin nodded understanding as James and I gathered our things. As we walked toward the exit, my father called after us. You walk away now, Gail, and you prove everything I just said about you. I paused at the door, turning back to face my parents one last time that evening. No, Dad. Me walking away proves I finally understand that I don't have to stand here and take this anymore. I wish you both well, but I won't be your emotional punching bag. The drive back to our hotel was quiet. James respected my need to process what had happened, occasionally squeezing my hand in silent support. Only when we were back in our room did I finally break down, years of pent-up hurt pouring out. You handled that with incredible dignity, James said, holding me close. They tried to humiliate you publicly, and you responded with honesty and restraint. I just needed to set the record straight, I whispered. I'm tired of their revisionist history. We decided to check out early the next morning and head home rather than attend the post-wedding brunch. I texted Rachel an apology, which she immediately answered with assurances that I had nothing to apologize for. Before turning off my phone for the night, I sent one final message to my parents. I need space to process what happened tonight. Please don't contact me for the next week. Neither replied, but I felt a weight lift as I set my phone aside. For the first time, I was setting a boundary without guilt or fear of their reaction. I had no idea that their response would go far beyond anything I could have anticipated. The week of space I'd requested passed quietly. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of a major campaign deadline. James gave me the emotional support I needed, without pushing me to process faster than I was ready. By the following Sunday, I felt centered enough to check my parents' social media pages, curious if they'd made any reference to our confrontation. Nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The notification came first, a text from my cousin Rachel. "Have you seen what Aunt Martha posted? Call me ASAP." A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I opened Facebook. It took only seconds to find the post that had prompted Rachel's concern. My mother had written a lengthy public missive the day after the wedding. The post had over 100 comments and dozens of shares. With heavy hearts, Harold and I must address a painful family situation. It began. Our daughter Gail publicly humiliated us at her cousin's wedding yesterday, accusing us of failing to support her and taking credit for her success. Nothing could be further from the truth. The post continued with a completely revised version of my childhood and education. According to my mother, they had encouraged her artistic talents while gently suggesting practical applications. She claimed they had contributed significantly to my education expenses and maintained a loving open door during my college years. Despite our sacrifices and unwavering support, the post concluded, Gail has chosen to paint us as villains in her success story. The ingratitude and disrespect she displayed yesterday shocked our entire family. We ask for privacy and prayers as we navigate this heartbreaking situation. The comments section was worse. Friends and acquaintances of my parents expressed outrage on their behalf. People who had never met me condemned my shameful behavior. Some suggested I was mentally unstable or influenced by that boyfriend of hers. A few even tagged me, ensuring I'd see their judgments. I sat frozen phone in hand as James entered the living room with coffee mugs. One look at my face and he set the mugs down, rushing to my side. "What happened?" he asked, peering at my screen. Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. As he read, his expression shifted from concern to disbelief to anger. "This is gaslighting on a public scale," he said finally. "They're rewriting reality and rallying people against you based on lies." Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer shock of such betrayal. They know this isn't true. They know they cut me off. My father literally said at the wedding that they withdrew support. My phone began buzzing with messages from family members who had seen the post. Some expressed concern, others disappointment in my treatment of my parents. The public shaming was accomplishing exactly what my parents intended, making me appear ungrateful and unstable, while preserving their image as devoted, long-suffering parents. "What should I do?" I asked James, feeling overwhelmed by the public nature of the attack. "First, document everything," he advised. "Screenshot the post, the comments save it all. Then decide if you want to respond now or take time to think." I opted for the latter, turning off notifications and focusing on deep breathing exercises my therapist had taught me. By evening, I'd calmed enough to draft a simple private message to my parents. "I've seen your Facebook post. The claims you've made are demonstrably false. I'm deeply hurt that you would publicly misrepresent our history, rather than address the actual issues between us. I still need space now more than ever." Their response came within minutes. "We only told our side of the story after you humiliated us publicly. If you'd like to discuss this like adults, we can meet tomorrow." Something about their quick reply and insistence on meeting in person set off warning bells. They weren't acknowledging the falsehoods or expressing remorse, they were trying to regain control of the narrative, and my response to it. "Not ready for a meeting," I replied. "Need time to process this betrayal." I silenced my phone again and spent the evening researching the psychology of public shaming and narcissistic family dynamics. Everything I read confirmed what I was experiencing. My parents were using classic manipulation tactics to maintain their public image at my expense. The next morning, I woke to knocking at my apartment door. James was already up, peering through the peephole. "It's your parents," he whispered, concern etched on his face. My heart raced as I checked my appearance in the hallway mirror. I was still in pajamas, hair unbrushed, eyes puffy from a night of disrupted sleep. Not ideal for confrontation, but I wouldn't keep them waiting outside where neighbors might notice. "I'll be right beside you," James assured me as I nodded for him to open the door. My parents stood in the hallway dressed impeccably as always. My mother held a small gift bag, a peace offering strategy she'd employed throughout my childhood after particularly harsh episodes. "Gail, sweetheart," she began, her voice honey sweet, "we need to talk." "You could have called first," I replied, not moving to let them in. "We tried calling, you've blocked us," my father stated flatly, which wasn't true. I'd only silenced notifications. Rather than argue the point, I stepped aside. "20 minutes, that's all I can spare this morning." They exchanged glances as they entered, clearly having expected a longer audience. My father took in my apartment with the barely disguised disdain he always showed for my living choices, despite my well-appointed space reflecting my professional success. "We need you to fix this situation," he said without preamble once we were seated in the living room. "Fix what situation exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "This family discord, it's affecting everyone." My mother placed the gift bag on the coffee table. "We thought we could discuss a joint statement for Facebook. Something explaining that emotions ran high at the wedding, but we're all reconciled now." The audacity was breathtaking. "So you want me to publicly forgive you for lies you told about me?" "They weren't lies," my father insisted, his face reddening. "Just our perspective." "Your perspective claimed you financially supported my education when you didn't contribute a dime. It claimed you encouraged my career when you actively discouraged it at every turn." My mother leaned forward, her practiced, concerned expression in place. "Sweetheart, memory is subjective. We remember offering support that you refused." "That's not how reality works," I replied, feeling my composure slipping. "You can't just rewrite history because the truth makes you look bad." My father's demeanor suddenly shifted, his expression hardening. "Do you understand how this affects us? Our friends are asking questions. Your behavior reflects on our parenting. Your parenting reflects on your parenting," I countered. "And frankly, that post you made proves exactly what kind of parents you've been. You need to consider the consequences of continuing this rebellion," my father said, his voice lowering ominously. "You work in a field where reputation matters. Would your company appreciate knowing their senior designer is involved in public family drama?" The threat landed with stunning clarity. "Are you suggesting you try to damage my professional reputation?" "Of course not," my mother interjected quickly, shooting my father a warning look. "We would never." "But Harold's right that perception matters in business. A simple reconciliation post would put this all to bed." James, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "Did you just threaten Gail's career because she won't cover for your lies?" "Stay out of this," my father snapped. "This is family business." "James is family to me," I stated firmly. "And he stays." My mother's eyes welled with tears right on cue. "We just want our daughter back." "Is that so wrong? We miss you. We're proud of you. We just want peace." For a moment, I felt the familiar tug of guilt. My mother's tears had always been my weakness, the quickest way to make me question my own boundaries. But something had fundamentally shifted inside me since the wedding confrontation. "If you want peace," I said carefully, "start by removing that false Facebook post and making a public apology for misrepresenting our history." "Absolutely not," my father replied instantly. "We have nothing to apologize for." "Then neither do I stated, standing up. "And our 20 minutes are up." "Gail, be reasonable." My mother pleaded, tears flowing freely now. "I am being reasonable. I'm setting a boundary. Either you acknowledge the truth or we have nothing more to discuss." My father stood towering over me as he had throughout my childhood when trying to intimidate me. "You're making a mistake." James stepped between us, his presence calm but unmistakably protective. "I think it's time for you both to leave." The shock on my father's face was almost comical. No one had ever directly challenged his authority this way in front of me. "This isn't over," he warned as my mother gathered her purse and the rejected gift bag. After they left, I collapsed onto the couch, shaking with adrenaline. "They actually threatened my job," I whispered in disbelief. James sat beside me, his expression grave. "I think we need to take this seriously." They're escalating because they're losing control over you." He was right. Within hours, I received messages from colleagues asking about family concerns they'd heard about. Checking my professional social media accounts, I discovered several new comments from strangers questioning my character. Most alarming was a call from my boss, Andrea. "Gail, I received a strange email from someone concerned about your emotional stability. Normally, I'd ignore this kind of thing, but they mentioned specific clients by name. Do you know what this might be about?" Cold fear washed over me as I realized how far my parents were willing to go. "Andrea, I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with some family issues that are getting out of hand. I can explain everything." By the end of the day, it was clear my parents had launched a coordinated campaign to pressure me into compliance. Their friends were messaging me. Distant relatives were taking sides. And somehow they had found ways to reach into my professional sphere. That night, lying awake beside a sleeping James, I realized I had reached a breaking point. This was no longer about maintaining peace or managing difficult parents. This was about surviving their attempt to destroy what I'd built when they couldn't control it. Something inside me hardened into resolve. If they wanted war, they would learn I was no longer the compliant daughter they could manipulate. It was time to speak my truth, with evidence to back it up. The next few days became a blur of anxiety and strategic planning. My parents continued their pressure campaign, alternating between guilt-inducing messages, "We're only trying to protect the family name," and thinly veiled threats, "Think about your future in this industry." Meanwhile, I carefully documented everything while consulting with both my therapist and a legal advisor about my options. "Legally, you have grounds for harassment," my lawyer friend Sophia explained over coffee. "But pursuing that might escalate things further. What's your ideal outcome here?" I considered her question carefully. "I want the truth acknowledged. I want them to stop threatening my career. And I want genuine accountability, not just damage control." James suggested we take a weekend away to clear my head before making any decisions. We booked a cabin in the Wisconsin Dells about 3 hours from Chicago. The distance from cell service and social media proved therapeutic, allowing me space to connect with what I truly wanted beyond the immediate crisis. On our first night there, wrapped in a blanket on the cabin's porch swing, I admitted something to James I'd barely acknowledged to myself. Part of me has always hoped they'd eventually recognize how they've hurt me, that someday they'd offer a genuine apology, and we could build a healthy relationship. James nodded understanding. "That's a natural desire. Children want their parents' approval and love no matter how old they get." "But that's not going to happen, is it?" I stared at the stars overhead, feeling an odd mixture of grief and clarity. They're incapable of that level of honesty and self-reflection. Based on their actions, especially recently, probably not, James agreed gently. "But that says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations." That conversation marked a turning point. I realized I'd been making decisions based on a fantasy future reconciliation, one where my parents magically transformed into the supportive family I'd always wanted. Accepting that this was unlikely freed me to act based on reality rather than hope. When we returned to Chicago Sunday evening, I found dozens of messages waiting, including an unsettling voicemail from my father. "Your silence is only making things worse. Either you help fix the situation by tomorrow, or don't be surprised at what happens next." That was the final push I needed. I spent all night at my computer compiling evidence and writing my response. I retrieved old emails where my parents explicitly stated they would provide no financial support for art school nonsense. I found text messages where they'd taken credit for my success to relatives while simultaneously dismissing my career to me. I even uncovered the college fund they'd supposedly established for me, which tax documents revealed they'd spent on a boat the year I turned 18. By morning, I had created a comprehensive factual account of our relationship, supported by documentation. I showed the draft to James, who whistled low. "This is powerful," he said. "Are you sure you're ready to share this publicly?" "I'm not attacking them," I clarified. "I'm simply correcting the record with evidence. And yes, I'm ready." I scheduled the post for noon when I knew my parents would be at their weekly lunch with friends, the same friends who had been bombarding me with messages on their behalf. Then I turned my phone to silent and went to work focusing on a design project that required my full attention. When I checked social media that evening, the response was overwhelming. My post had received hundreds of comments, most expressing support and sharing similar experiences with controlling parents. Several of my cousins had commented publicly confirming they'd witnessed my parents' behavior over the years. Even my Aunt Susan weighed in. I've watched Martha and Harold rewrite history for decades. Thank you for your courage, Gail. The post hadn't been vindictive or emotional. I'd simply presented facts, screenshots, and my own experience in straightforward terms, concluding with, I share this not to hurt my parents, but to reclaim my narrative and stand in my truth. I wish them well, but I will no longer participate in maintaining family myths at the expense of my well-being. My parents' response came swiftly. First, they attempted to have my post removed, reporting it as harassment. When that failed, they published their own response post that combined partial admissions with continued justifications. While we may have been imperfect parents, Gail's portrayal leaves out our good intentions. We only wanted to protect her from disappointment. The damage to their carefully constructed image was done, however. Friends and family who had initially sided with them based on their first post now reached out to me with apologies and support. Several mentioned that they'd had doubts about my parents' version, but hadn't felt comfortable questioning it publicly. That night, my father called, his voice trembling with rage. Take it down, he demanded without greeting. Take it down now. No, I replied calmly. I won't remove the truth. You've humiliated us? Is that what you wanted, to destroy your family? I wanted accountability. I wanted the lies to stop. The post stays up. Then don't expect to ever hear from us again, he threatened. That's your choice, Dad. But if you ever want a relationship with me in the future, it will need to be based on honesty and respect. He hung up without another word. I set down my phone expecting to feel devastated. Instead, I felt oddly peaceful. The threat of being disowned, once my greatest fear, now felt almost liberating. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Family members I'd barely known reached out with their own stories of manipulative behavior from my parents. My mother's sister Jane called from Florida saying, they did the same thing to me when I divorced Tom. Martha rewrote the whole story, making me the villain. I've been watching this happen to you for years, but didn't know how to help. And most surprisingly, my father's brother Alan contacted me for the first time in over a decade. Your grandmother left you money for college, he revealed. Harold was supposed to give it to you when you turned 18. When I asked about it years later, he said you'd refused it out of spite. These revelations confirmed what I'd long suspected: my experience wasn't isolated, but part of a larger pattern. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. I'd been subjected to manipulation so consistent that I'd normalized it. As 1 week stretched into 2 without contact from my parents, I found myself processing years of suppressed emotions. Sometimes I'd cry suddenly while cooking dinner or wake up from dreams where I was still trying to earn their approval. James remained my rock throughout, neither pushing me to get over it nor allowing me to spiral into self-doubt. Grief isn't linear, he reminded me. You're mourning both the relationship you had and the one you deserved but never got. My therapist helped me understand that the public nature of the conflict had forced a reckoning that might otherwise have taken years. Some family systems can only maintain their dysfunction in secrecy, she explained. You brought light to the darkness, and the system is reorganizing in response. This perspective helped me weather the waves of emotion as the weeks passed. I focused on self-care, my relationship with James, and the supportive connections that had emerged from the fallout. Gradually, I found myself feeling lighter, more authentic, no longer carrying the burden of maintaining family fictions. The silence from my parents lasted exactly 3 months and 12 days. I had just received news of a major industry award nomination for a campaign I designed when an unfamiliar number called my phone. Thinking it might be related to the nomination, I answered. Gail, it's Mom. Her voice sounded different, smaller somehow, lacking the confident manipulation I was accustomed to. I said nothing, waiting. Are you there? She asked after a moment. I'm here, I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. We'd like to meet with you. To talk. I noticed she was using we, but calling from a number I didn't recognize. Why the new phone number? A pause then. We've had some changes. Could we meet somewhere in public if that makes you more comfortable? Curiosity won out over caution. The lakefront coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, Thursday at 1. We'll be there, she agreed, ending the call without the emotional manipulations that would have been standard in the past. I immediately called James, who offered to join me for the meeting. I can sit at a separate table if you want privacy, but be nearby if you need support. His offer touched me deeply. Actually, I'd like you at the table with me. We're a package deal now. And Thursday arrived with surprising calmness. I'd expected anxiety, but instead felt centered in my boundaries and clear about my expectations. As James and I approached the coffee shop, I spotted my parents already seated at a corner table. The sight of them gave me momentary pause. They looked older, somehow less intimidating than the giants they'd been in my mind. My mother noticed us first, nudging my father. They both stood as we approached, an unusually respectful gesture from them. Neither attempted to hug me, another deviation from their normal boundary-crossing behavior. "Thank you for meeting us," my father said as we all sat down. His typical authoritarian tone was subdued. "What would you like to talk about?" I asked directly once we had ordered our drinks. My parents exchanged glances before my mother spoke. "First, we want to apologize for our behavior. The Facebook post, the threats, all of it, it was wrong." The straightforwardness of her statement caught me off guard. I'd expected deflection, partial admissions, or conditional apologies. "We've had some wake-up calls," my father continued hesitantly. "After your post, people started sharing their own stories about us. Not just family, but friends, too. It's been difficult to face. We lost our standing in the community," my mother admitted. "The country club committee asked Harold to resign. Our church group suggested we take a break from leadership roles. So that explained the sudden humility social consequences had accomplished, what my pain never could. I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. I'm sorry it took public humiliation for you to consider how your actions affected me," I said honestly. "But I appreciate the apology." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your Uncle Alan contacted you about the college fund, didn't he?" I nodded. "We've set up an account with the equivalent amount plus interest," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. "It doesn't undo the past, but it acknowledges the wrong." The gesture seemed genuine, but I made no move to take the envelope. "This isn't about money. It never was." "We know," my mother said quietly. "It's about respect, recognition, things we failed to give you." James, who had been silently supportive beside me, asked, "What are you hoping will come from this meeting?" My parents seemed surprised by his question, as if they hadn't fully considered their expectations. "We'd like a chance to build a different kind of relationship," my father finally said, "if that's possible." I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering their request. I'm open to that possibility, but it would require real change, not just temporary remorse because you're facing social consequences. "What would that look like to you?" my mother asked. "Therapy, both individual and family sessions if we decide to work on our relationship. Respecting my boundaries without questioning or guilt-tripping. No more public narratives about me without my consent. And genuine interest in my life and career, not just how they reflect on you." I expected resistance, particularly to the therapy suggestion. Instead, my father nodded slowly. "We've actually started seeing someone," he admitted, the confession clearly difficult for him, "separately and together. It's been eye-opening." "That's a good start," I acknowledged, feeling a flicker of hope despite my caution. We spoke for nearly 2 hours, the conversation more honest than any we'd had in my adult life. They shared insights from their therapy about how their own upbringings had shaped their parenting. I explained how their control had affected my self-worth and relationships. There were uncomfortable moments and old patterns that briefly emerged, but overall it felt like speaking to versions of my parents I'd never met before. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked tentatively, "Would you be willing to meet again, perhaps in a month?" "I think I would," I replied, surprising myself with the realization that I meant it. Outside the coffee shop, James squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" "Cautiously optimistic," I admitted, but also proud of myself for maintaining boundaries while leaving the door open to something healthier. Over the following months, our relationship began a slow transformation. There were setbacks and old habits that resurfaced, but also genuine moments of connection that would have seemed impossible before. My parents attended one of my industry events, listening attentively as colleagues praised my work without trying to take credit or minimize my achievements. I maintained strong boundaries throughout the process. When old patterns emerged, I named them directly. "That sounded like you're dismissing my experience again." Or, "I notice you're trying to guilt me into changing my plans." Sometimes they recognized these moments themselves, a sign that their therapy was having an impact. The journey wasn't linear, and complete healing remained a work in progress. Some wounds were too deep for perfect resolution. But I found peace in accepting that reality, rather than chasing the fantasy of perfect parents or perfect reconciliation. More valuable than the changes in my parents were the changes in myself. Working with my therapist, I recognized how people-pleasing behaviors had permeated my life beyond my family relationships. I became more assertive at work, more authentic in friendships, and more comfortable with conflict when necessary. My relationship with James deepened through the experience. 6 months after the coffee shop meeting, he proposed during a weekend trip to California, ironically near the art school my parents had forbidden me to attend. The symmetry felt meaningful, a full circle moment representing how far I'd come. When I called to tell my parents about the engagement, their response was measured but genuine. "He's good for you," my father acknowledged. "We can see that now." "Will you be inviting us to the wedding?" my mother asked, careful not to assume. "Yes," I said, "but as guests who respect our choices, not as directors of the event." They accepted this boundary without protest, perhaps the clearest sign of change. Looking back at the journey that began with that explosive wedding confrontation and Facebook betrayal, I marvel at how completely my life has transformed. What started as the most painful experience of my adult life became the catalyst for authentic living and genuine relationships. The first few months after confronting my parents' manipulation were excruciating. I experienced all the classic grief stages, denial that the relationship was truly that toxic, anger at years of control disguised as love, bargaining about whether I could have handled things differently, depression about the family connections I thought I'd lost forever, and finally, acceptance of the reality rather than the fantasy. Healing wasn't instant or perfect. I still occasionally catch myself seeking validation in unhealthy ways or doubting my perceptions when confronted with conflict. The difference now is that I recognize these patterns as echoes of my upbringing rather than truth about my worth. My therapist helped me understand that while forgiveness might eventually come, it wasn't required for my healing. Forgiveness is a personal journey, not an obligation, she explained. What matters more is forgiveness of yourself for all the years you tried to earn love that should have been freely given. That perspective freed me from the pressure to quickly reconcile or minimize the harm done. I could acknowledge my parents' progress while still honoring the legitimacy of my pain and boundaries. The most unexpected gift from this difficult chapter has been the community that emerged around me. Beyond James's unwavering support, I discovered allies in extended family members, colleagues, and even strangers who recognized their own stories in mine. We formed an informal support network, sharing resources and celebrating each small victory in reclaiming our authentic selves. My professional life flourished as I channeled my newfound confidence into more innovative design work. The nomination I'd received turned into an award, followed by a promotion that would have been unimaginable when I was still seeking parental approval for every career move. James and I bought our first home together, a light-filled space with a dedicated studio, where I could pursue personal art projects alongside my commercial work. On my 33rd birthday, I completed a series of paintings exploring family dynamics that will be exhibited at a local gallery next month. My relationship with my parents continues to evolve. We'll never have the effortless closeness that some families enjoy, but we found a way to connect with authenticity and respect that makes limited interaction meaningful rather than damaging. They've maintained their therapy, working through their own issues separately from their relationship with me, a healthy separation that benefits us all. The most profound lesson I've learned is that family is sometimes chosen rather than born. True family consists of those who see you clearly and love you anyway, who celebrate your triumphs without needing to claim them, who respect your boundaries while remaining close to your heart. Standing in my truth publicly was terrifying, but it created space for genuine connection, impossible within the confines of pretense and manipulation. The freedom I've found in authentic living extends far beyond family relationships, touching every aspect of my life with newfound joy and purpose. If you're facing similar struggles with toxic family dynamics, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healing. Speaking your truth isn't disrespectful, it's essential for authenticity. And building a life based on genuine connection rather than obligation isn't giving up on family. It's creating space for relationships that nurture rather than deplete your spirit. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure to live authentically? What boundaries have helped you maintain healthy relationships with difficult family members? Share your experiences in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated relationships with strength and dignity. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to honor your own.